The Fruit of Grisaia is a beloved visual novel to plenty of fans. Lovable heroines and a badass main character, all packaged together as a passionate romance helping these girls with their emotional and mental issues. The side story is none of that. In a very bold decision, the developers decided to make Grisaia into an action-heavy series, Onward. Two fine series, but what's actually in here is what old fans have problems with. And if you weren't planning on reading these two series to begin with, at least stay so you can listen to me explain the story so you can be in the know. Grisaia Phantom Trigger is a side story that takes place after the events of the original Grisaia trilogy series. Because it is a side story, this series can be read separately from the original trilogy. This is important to note because the original Grisaia trilogy series and the Phantom Trigger series are two very different works. If you were expecting the same type of comedy harem rom-com antics with a bit of action mixed in, you are going to be disappointed. However, if you liked Grisaia's action scenes and were interested in Yuji's life as a teenage mercenary on call, Phantom Trigger goes much deeper into that type of action story. Only this time, we multiply that 4 times fold with our new cast of heroines, each with their own misfortunate backstories. Mihama Academy, now having been repurposed as a specialist military school, is now training young operatives to defend the country against terrorists. As part of a secret government organization known as SWORD, you'll see the lives of these adolescents as they polish their skills to carry out thankless, dangerous missions for the country. And who better to introduce these girls than a complete civilian who has no idea what they're doing here. Meet Arasaka Shiori, the new homeroom teacher hired at Mihama Academy, a completely ordinary person who they just pretty much picked off the street. Arasaka is like if you hired a freshly graduated college student who applied off of a whim because they were desperate for a job. And oh boy, her underqualifications ended up working in her favor. Thrown into this environment where shooting drills and counting corpses are commonplace, Arasaka is basically the new transfer student. Her status as a ordinary civilian and her docile, almost cowardly personality makes her the least capable candidate for teaching these trained assassins. And yet, she's been given the job of teaching these children regardless. No matter how special and specialized they are, ain't no one escaping gen ed classes. I don't care how many terrorists you've killed, gun to your head, what is the powerhouse of the cell called? Meta-wise, Arasaka is the audience's insert as we get introduced into these girls' world and how they operate. It's a super unique dynamic, and all throughout Phantom Trigger's first volume onward, Arasaka is forced to adapt to her new environment in order to better understand her students, both theoretically and practically. After all, on-hands applications tends to make for a good experience. Coin flip time, gun to your head, Arasaka, what's the proper procedure to disarm a bomb? To the Sword Girls, these operations are normal everyday occurrences. They don't have a second thought against it, much to Arasaka's disdain. In fact, it's her apprehensiveness towards all of this as a quote-unquote normal person that ends up creating a lot of good reflections and discussions that Phantom Trigger creates. Examples being the politics of war, the righteousness of justice, and the moral ethics of putting kids on the battlefield. Because, again, while they can pop someone's head off upon orders, they are still quirky anime high school girls. There's Rena, a lively and energetic gun woman, ex-faithful rabid dog. Toka, the hostile, totally not a tsundere, but extremely no-nonsense sniper expert. Murasaki, an eccentric stealth agent in all things ninja-related. Chris, an explosive and computer specialist doubling as the dorm mother. And last but not least, Haruto, the young but fearsomely experienced and highly capable team handler. Over the course of the series, this daycare of gun fanatic misfits starts picking up more and more team members, each with their own unique personalities and particular set of skills. Altogether, they become the Dream Team Special Agent Force Squad. Imagine John Wick, James Bond, Jason Bourne, and Agent 47 all together, but as cute Japanese anime girls. It's hard not to like them. Again, if you were invested in reading all about Yuji's background as a child assassin, you'll get similar vibes here, albeit less dramatically horrific backstories and having considerably less incest. Every installment of Phantom Trigger describes a series of incidents in these girls' everyday lives, each one focusing on a particular heroine and their unique backstory. You'll get to know about their specific problem they're dealing with, and it's through the introduction of another character that helps flesh them out, either as a mark of how they've changed for the better or to serve as a role model. Rena, the loyal rabid dog, comes into contact with another girl who's built exactly like her. Toka, a very aggressive, quarrelsome individual, finds herself training a meek junior sniper in training. Murasaki has to deal with her own problems of self-worth in the face of her more experienced assault ninja sister, and Chris has to deal with a literal child who's very eager to step onto the battlefield. Phantom Trigger is very character-focused. There isn't an overarching plot until halfway through the series. I have particular problems in that area, but I'll save that for later. Regardless, the story is still dedicated to providing meaningful commentary on how these girls see the world around them, with them pulling a trigger every once in a while. The slight problem is that it also has commentary that is far less than meaningful too. To preface, if there's one type of person I can wholeheartedly recommend Phantom Trigger to, it's the gun fanatics. Phantom Trigger really likes to go in depth with detailed gun mechanics, fighting style breakdowns, and proper military training procedures. This VN is one of those rare instances where you can really feel the author's ultra-specific hobby/occupation bleeding through to the script, and that includes the author's ultra-specific food reviews. Phantom Trigger has this tendency to have abnormally lengthy, extremely detailed scenes of the characters just eating. Whenever the girls aren't in a shootout, they'll be chowing down on some melon bread and talking about how good it is. I find it amusing how they try to spin some philosophical life lessons out of it. Phantom Trigger isn't just propaganda about how bad war is, but also to glaze Japanese food. To anyone else, it'll feel a lot like boring slice-of-life info dumping if you're not interested in these topics. That said, the small insight about these casual scenes outside of the action is how they show off the characters. Every tendency, every habit, every specific preference is always a result of the life they've lived or their core beliefs. Insert a scene of this poor girl crying over shitty fried rice. These moments of pleasant vibes should also be taken into context, given the underlying fact that all of these girls are disposable. They were given another chance, only for that to be the government deliberately forcing them into unreasonable situations as silent soldiers fighting for their country. Over the course of the story, you'll see a common trend throughout this series, called you authority. Throughout all of the operations, the bigwigs are the ones calling the shots from their nice leather chairs. They don't see how it is on the grounds. They see these soldiers as useful government resources, expendable tools. Meanwhile, most of the action is handled by the girls, actual human soldiers fighting on the front lines. And in the face of seemingly impossible situations, they are forced to just suck it up and dedicate their lives. Everyone's dealt with shitty, unreasonable bosses before, and this is no exception. In the military and government world in here, the complexity of the amount of shit a person has to wade through is insane. Through all of the relentless red tape, intentional ignorance, and just straight up corruption, it's a test of mental patience and self-discipline to not pull the trigger. For the first time, the middle managers have the toughest jobs, listening to the complaints of the people underneath them and fighting with upper management. Phantom Trigger really puts that distastefulness into perspective. These characters could have lived a normal average life, but instead they're fighting a battle in the shadows with no rewards or acknowledgement. So the audacity for upper management to indulge in their selfish acts really strikes that nerve. But as they endure through all of this, these girls eventually find a sense of inner strength and purpose, reasons to truly live for that they may not have found otherwise. Grisaia Phantom Trigger may not be romance focused at all, but the fundamental core of Grisaia still remains in Phantom Trigger. However, the series isn't flawless. While I like these individual volumes as the team expands, it's only when the story builds up to its grander climax that I'm critical of. Volumes 7 and 8 send the team off to their largest conflict to date, and funny enough, it's because I know they are extremely capable, OP even, and I felt no sense of urgency and stakes. This is made even more apparent with the lack of build-up tension to the game's final mastermind. I understand what they were trying to do, but revisiting the same type of antagonist and relationship dynamic as the original trilogy, but with much less development, certainly hurt my enjoyment at the end. I also found the story direction here questionable too. They added the stakes I wanted, but not in the way I wanted. Without giving too much away, Volume 8 is depressingly grim. It's mostly them retelling the drastic consequences of war and the hypocrisy of self-righteous justice, but done in a very bitter, harsh way that overstayed its welcome. I really didn't need to see so many NPCs die to understand this point. What I did find super interesting is that after 8 volumes of being kinetic, the final installment actually has 2 different endings depending on the choices you make. I say this knowing I still question the actual choice prompt itself, because the correct answer is the complete opposite of what's logically correct in that situation. but I digress. Surprised they even decided to go with this route to begin with, while still making it a teachable moment at both of its endings. While Phantom Trigger is arguably fundamentally the same in terms of writing direction, girls with grim troubled pasts learning to grow and mature through the relationship of others, Phantom Trigger will never be, nor will it ever meet the expectations of the original trilogy for fans, simply because Phantom Trigger is not a romance visual novel. The original trilogy works so well because it's in the romance genre, getting passionately invested into a heroine, falling in love through their charms, learning about their tragic backstories, and then overcoming their traumas through a special bond. Even if the writing philosophy is the same, there's no doubt romance VN diehard / Grisaia fans will be severely less interested in Phantom Trigger, because Phantom Trigger is an action series. There's barely any romance elements in here. The franchise hard pivoted into a new genre, but lost sight of what made their fans love the original series. Phantom Trigger is still a pretty decent series to read and enjoy, but it's not the Grisaia that the fans wanted. They could have probably gotten old fans interested in a new cast and setting, but only if it was the exact same genre and format. So then, what does the franchise decide to do next? Double down on the action genre and bring the Mihama girls back for nostalgia in Chronos Rebellion, I guess. Now, to start, Grisaia Chronos Rebellion started out as an all-ages gacha game. Now before you click away, because I know you heard the words gacha game and immediately groaned, let me explain. Basically, after shutting down the mobile game, the story itself was ported over to the PC. No game mechanics, no gambling for characters, just the pure story. And it's actually better than you might think. With the exception of the prologue, it feels like I'm back in the Grisaia world, both with all of its familiar eccentricities and brand new highlights. Cast members from across the games finally get to interact for the first time together. Amane and Maki get to bond over being fellow biker brethren, the overly passionate Rena makes friends with the less than sociable Yumiko, we have a meeting of the minds between two people who are quite literally the same person, and frankly, the idea of pairing practically anyone with Michiru is just so strange and unusual.
銃を見せてください。だから欲しい銃を選びたいから。
いや、諦めなさい。
ツンデレは諦めが悪いのよ。
意味がわからない。
あれ？じゃあもう一回言うわね。銃を見せてください。
意味がわからないのはそっちじゃないわよ。
Chronos Rebellion has genuine merit in complementing the original Fruit cast. The slice of life segments further explores their relationship dynamics both with each other and the new characters. Simply seeing how well aware they are of each other's strengths and weaknesses ends up becoming their greatest strength as a team. The girls may not be as strong as Class A, the top of the school and frankly military monsters, but they took down the biggest terrorists in the world, so like I guess that balances that out. And besides, it's not like those skills have dulled any less. Rather, I argue they've grown more. Why else would a high-ranking officer give Michiru access to any firearm? It's the girls' struggle to accomplish their new mission objective that ends up becoming a larger reflection of themselves and everything they've been through. Pretty satisfying overall. There's just one problem: expecting that they would be the main focus. Grisaia Chronos Rebellion is fundamentally a story that further expands Grisaia's counter-terrorist world building. Take it as another extended installment of Phantom Trigger, except with a completely new narrative. That is the main story. The Fruit Girls are the sub-story within the main story. Even the Phantom Trigger cast are sidelined here. To those that like the Phantom Trigger series, the dozens of us, the main story is pretty solid, actually incredible in some areas. But to those who like the original Fruit trilogy, this will disappoint you. This is action heavy, not romance heavy, although that does come into play. Of course, both stories do cross paths in probably the most interesting of ways. However, Chronos Rebellion is hyper-focused on the brand new story it wants to tell. One focused on Mihama's Class D for Deadstock, the absolute worst class in the military force. The only thing preventing them from being killed as soon as they step on the battlefield is their handler Arata, an ex-frontline soldier, and the PET system, an ability-syncing technology. And unfortunately for them, they end up finding a mysterious girl named L, someone linked to the international terrorist group Hadio. So it's up to them to deal with their grand acts of terrorism. I question the madman who approved this mission. And yet, it actually becomes the best possible thing for Class D's development. Remember, the Grisaia series at its core is about mental misfits and adolescent outcasts trying to survive in this world. Mihama Academy is specifically designed to house those outcasts and grant them a better life, even if that means working for the government, as secret on-hire killers. But what happens when those individuals are determined to be useless? Where do the outcasts of the outcasts go? Not only do the students in Class D have their mental hang-ups, they are inefficient impatient on the battlefield, almost ready to be killed or make a mistake at the most crucial step. Serika is terrible at wielding firearms, Flan keeps on hitting the enemy's flank, and even Arata, nicknamed Death Sign, has the Grim Reaper always watching him. A direct contrast to Phantom Trigger and Class A, who are practically invincible, and this becomes the most compelling aspect of their class. They are the underdogs. All of them are constantly growing with each new mission and ally they meet in every chapter. So when they finally achieve those personal victories in the process, either through the pressuring build-up through tense action scenes or the reassuring advice given to them by close people, the payoff is rewarding. Chronos Rebellion takes a while to get started, but is totally worth it if you keep reading onward, especially as things get crazier and wilder with how many unpredictable variables there are. Everyone's got their own personal agenda, and some of them are willing to turn their gun to achieve it. Even the classes themselves won't bat an eye at shooting their comrades if they get in the way. This makes engagements very tense to navigate, and yet at the same time also being very cheeky when reinforcements or a surprise solution breaks through the deadlock. Where when all hope is lost, it's worth persevering for that chance miracle that your allies that you placed your trust in will save you in the end, which falls in accordance with Chronos Rebellion's other important key element, the pet system and how it builds relationships. The only reason why Class D is able to keep itself afloat is because the pet system allows Arata to share his abilities with the rest of his team. While this does serve to give them that extra boost in strength they need, it also functions as an emotional measure. Their performance is based on their trust in each other, and if there's a problem, it requires them to work out their issues together. Pair this up with deeply introspective dialogue, and those critical moments hit for more impact. That said, this also becomes a very loose excuse for harem rom-com antics. Gotta hold hands if you want to link up, you know, the cheesy anime bits. And of course, some shenanigans are more absurd than others. It's a notable downside when it decides to be cheap with its execution in the first few chapters. Although, over time, I can say those small moments do help relieve the tension and help you grow attached to the girls. They might be military government forces, but they are still kids after all, ones who've encountered far more hardships than they ever needed to face. Grisaia Phantom Trigger and Chronos Rebellion is not the Fruit of Grisaia. Those coming in expecting that same vibe as the original will be disappointed. However, if you're looking for some thriller action, this series will very much satisfy you. In fact, I think it's the only visual novel series that's very military gun focused, so there's that super unique appeal. Now, if you like this video, you might want to check out this video over here or this one over here for a general visual novel recommendation. I would like to thank everyone on Patreon for supporting me in covering visual novels. You guys are fantastic. And if you'd like to be a part of that effort, please consider subscribing. And just remember, the inverse is also true. The more complicated the military gun operations are, the funnier it is when someone pulls out a sword.